case, like some of the others here, we're not really given any statements that indicate that we'll use like a definition of a linear pair, or a definition of supplementary, or a definition of right angles, definition of perpendicular. So we're looking at a picture. Do I have vertical angles I can use? Do I have a linear pair? Some of those things that they may not have to mention. And I think for most of these, we're looking at two smaller angles adding up to a larger angle. And I see that a couple different places. It looks like 1 and 2 together could get a larger angle. 3 and 4 together could get a larger angle. So let's start and see if that doesn't get me a couple other equations. Before I do that yet though, it's been pretty typical that we've been replacing. So to use replacement rule, I need to have the measures equal. So I'm going to go ahead and change this, these two equations that they give me, so that instead of being congruent and naming them congruent, I can say, well, the measures of these couple pairs of angles are going to be equal. If angle 1 and angle 4 are congruent, I know that measure of angle 1 equals measure of angle 4, because congruent means all the measures are the same, and for an angle, you only have that one angle measure. So how do you know that? We say, well, that's by definition of congruency with angles, because we only have, again, that one measure. So definition of congruent angles. And now I can use replacement rule because I have the measures equal to each other. Okay, going back to using the two smaller angles add up to the larger angle addition postulate, and I said it looked like measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 could add up to, what do we have, ABC. So measure of angle ABC. And it looks like also I can say this at the same time, since I'm using the same reason, measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 4 equals measure of angle BCD. And that's quite a few equations I have there. I have 4 equations, so I'm going to look and see, like, well, what types of things can I replace right now to make this work out, and see if I can't get angle 2 and 3 congruent. Well, let's see. A lot of times we've had the totals the same. Looking at here, ABC and BCD, well, that's not the same total. Well, actually, though, if you look up a little bit above, I do know those two totals are the same. So here's what I'm going to end up doing. I'm actually going to use this first equation. There's a few different ways you could do this. But I'm going to use that first equation. I'm going to replace measure of angle ABC. Instead of ABC, I'm going to replace it with those two sums. Instead of measure of angle BCD, I'm going to replace it with measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 4, replacement rule, which, you know, that's been working out pretty well. Looking at this, though, I have 2 and 3 here. Well, that's what I'm trying to prove. So I have a relationship with those two in it. Now I should be able to get this to work out so that those two are congruent. And to do that, that means 1 and 4 should cancel. So looking up, sure enough, 1 and 4 are the same, which if they weren't, this wouldn't be true. We wouldn't be able to prove it. But since they are, I'm going to do replacement rule again. I'm just going to replace one or the other. It doesn't matter. 1 and 4 are the same, so either one could be replaced for the other. I'll go ahead and leave measure of angle 1 there. Rewrite everything else, and at the very end, instead of measure of angle 4, I'm going to replace that with measure of angle 1. Replacement rule. And that's so I can cancel out the ones. And really, I'm not actually canceling out the ones. What we're actually going to do is subtract that using additive property of equality. Subtracting from both sides of an equation, you can just show me what you get. Measure of angle 2 equals measure of angle 3, which leaves me with just one last little technicality. Definition of congruency says if you can show all the measures are the same and they're congruent. And for angles, you only have to show the one measure, because an angle only has one measurement. So then that would be enough to say angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. And that went pretty quick.